Section C is asking some short answer questions. I think, as we can see from this particular exam paper here, what we're being asked to do is look for a definition and then an illustrative example of each of these. So hopefully this should be relatively easy for us. So why don't we have a go at these particular questions. So the first one that we've got in section C is non est factum. Now, I actually do know what this is. So it is about being familiar with terminology to help you understand where to go if you need clarification in your slides. So I know that this is a kind of unilateral mistake, right? So it's from consent. So it should be week 9, actually, not week 8. So you can obviously see I know what topics are in what part of the course. So unilateral mistake, where a general rule is that signed contracts are not able to be avoided, but they can be avoided where one party has a good reason for not reading the document and a mistake is about the fundamental nature of the contract. So it is one of the rare cases of unilateral mistake, and the courts aren't very sympathetic around this. So I need to get this through in the description. I also particularly need to get through in my description these two elements of showing non est factum. So non est factum, or not my deed or document, not my document, is a principle of law whereby one party asserts they did not know what contract they were entering. A case of unilateral mistake. Okay, so I do need to make sure that it's got these two elements in it, though, that I haven't quite captured yet in that particular explanation. So I want to say the courts are reticent or don't like to, they're reticent to set aside signed contracts. And non est factum will only apply where the party has a good reason. Say the party, or I could just write the person, where the person has a good reason for not reading the contract and the contract was fundamentally different to what they thought they were signing. So that's a bit of a long definition, but we've got those two sentences in there outlining the key principle and where it fits in law as part of unilateral mistake. And we've also got the two conditions that are required to show non est factum. But that's only, from memory, part of what I've been asked to do, isn't it? I now also have to come up with an illustrative example of what that might be. So an example, see what I'm saying, making it easy for the examiner, an example of non est factum would be a blind person signing a contract that they thought was to hire a car, but it was to buy a car. Okay, so the reason I've chosen that is I've tried to highlight a particular situation where there's a good reason for not signing it, and that it was a fundamentally different contract. They thought they were hiring a car, but they were actually buying it. Okay, so that's an example of how to answer number one. Number two is a whole of agreement clause. Okay. So whole of agreement clauses, where do they fit? I actually do know that's around the area of terms, etc. It's around collateral contracts and that particular area of the course. So I think it's around week 9, right? So if we have a term of the contract and written terms and a collateral contract, bingo, this is all I've got in my sheet, the whole of agreement clauses. Okay, my handy dandy sheet. So what's this about? Okay, in this area, we're dealing with a situation where we have a written contract. And what happens is someone makes a statement outside the contract, and one of the parties is trying to get that statement into the written contract. So normally, a written contract where it looks entire, it's presumed that they're all the terms that are in it. We know that there is an exception to that. The courts might find in rare instances if a substantial part of the contract's missing, then they might include the verbal plus the written. However, if you have a whole of agreement clause, that can't apply. So it's actually a protection around making the written contract the entirety of the contract. Let's translate that into an answer. A whole of agreement. What's the actual exam ask? A whole of agreement clause is a term of a contract that means all of the terms of the contract are in the written document. And so any verbal statements cannot be interpreted as terms of the contract. Okay. So a whole of agreement clause is a term of the contract that means all of the terms of the contract are in the written document. And so any verbal statements cannot be interpreted as terms of the contract. So an example might be where you buy a car that has a term stating this written contract contains all of the terms of the contract. So let's just pause for a minute. An example might be where you buy a car that has a term stating this written contract contains all the terms of the contract. So oral statements about the car made during the sale cannot therefore be terms of the contract. Okay, they will be representations. Okay.